Good evening.
Good evening. How are you, Dan?
Doing well on yourself?
I'm doing well. Trying to figure out how I can host a table. Okay. Maybe it's here. Okay, I'm having. Well, hopefully someone can claim host. I usually can. I'm having trouble.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Let me see if I can. I don't see an icon that allows me to do
Yeah,
that.
neither do I.
Um,
Huh.
See, the only thing I can do is participants. Oh, here it is. Click participants and then claim host.
There we go.
And then
Okay.
ask for the host key.
Yeah, which I have. So I will
Oh.
do that.
Joey, you didn't give me the host key.
Oh, you gotta know people. Do you want it? I'll make you a co-host, Jim.
I'll survive.
Well, I'll have to make somebody a co-host if they're sharing something.
Yep.
Oh, let me get rid of this. There we go. Okay, let's see. What do I have on here? Participants.
All right, we got a couple of minutes, I think. Yep.
We have Jim Sullivan. We have Dan Sherman. We have Dennis Hogan. We have Amy. We have Billy. We have Kevin Gill. We have Mike McCarthy, Pete Dion, Stefan Chase. Teray. Okay.
I'm aware of two people not going to make it tonight, so give it another minute, I guess.
Okay, who are they that aren't coming? Just so I know.
Not coming is Joe. He's double booked.
Yeah.
Bertrand and Brian Cusack.
I figured Brian's going to be at the game.
He says he's the photographer.
Oh, really?
I think we need one more for a quorum, but still got a couple minutes. Mr. Chairman, if it's okay, we do have a couple of light department people on. We got Pete Dion, the general manager, and Mike McCarthy, their general counsel, and maybe we could do their article first.
Sure. I'd be fine with that. That's the Article 5 for the easement. Is that right?
Yes.
Yep.
Thank you.
Excuse me.
Zach is on. David is on. Zach. One, two, three, four, five, six.
Did you say Zach was on?
I see Zach. I think Zach jumped on. He can't get away.
Who is MM?
That's Mike McCarthy. That's the general counsel. I believe it's Mike McCarthy, the general counsel for the.
It looks it.
Hi, Jim. It is.
Okay.
How you doing? Good evening. So what do we got? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I have 8, I think.
I think we have 8, yeah.
And I only have 14 members currently.
Stefan and Terry. Yep, you've got 8.
So I would like to, Doug Butler should join us. He thought he was going to have a conflict, but he doesn't. So he should join, and there are others that would likely join. I'll call the meeting to order, Steve. You good?
Sounds great to me.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. Thanks for joining. Excuse me. The Finance Committee meeting for November 10th in advance of the town meeting. Number of articles to look at. Any public participation, first off? Seeing none. You want to review the minutes, Steve, before we do the articles?
Sure.
Or you want to?
Sure.
Sure. So the first set of minutes is the Finance Committee subcommittee on forecasting. That was,
Yeah, unfortunately, we need Don and Doug. Right now, it's only me.
yeah. Okay, and I did find a couple of typos on there, Steve, but we can hit that. I'll defer that. We'll come back.
Okay.
We'll go to the next meeting minutes, which is the June 23 meeting minutes, Finance Committee's last meeting in the spring. I'm assuming everybody got the link and was able to see the documents.
Move to accept.
Second,
Sorry, who was the first and the second? Thank you.
Dan,
Bill.
second.
Bill and Dan, got it. Thank you very much. Any discussion on the meeting minutes for June 23rd, 2022? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? No opposition. All right, very good. Why don't we hold off on the forecasting subcommittee discussion, Steve, and we'll move to the articles.
Sure.
And then we'll do the review of FY22 last, and we'll do the discussion on the finances prior. All right.
Yep, whatever you want, Mr. Chairman.
So move to item number 6.
And you want to jump down to 6, Roman numeral 4? So the light department can do their stuff and then they can.
Yep. Is it Roman numeral 4? I have one that says it's Article 5, but yep.
Okay, yep. Whichever one. That's the
Very
light
good.
department.
I agree. We'll go to the light department easement article. Who wants to speak on behalf of that?
Why don't I just introduce it and provide some context? So Michael McCarthy, on behalf of the light department. Pete will cover the details but I'll just kind of give, as I said, the context to it. The light department is working with the vocational school and the capital, the people representing the high school in terms of the future construction, and have an opportunity and see an opportunity to construct a micro grid. And I'll let Pete get into the details on that. On a parcel of land up on Hemlock Road, on the right-hand side as you approach the Voc school, and just before the gate at the Voc school, there's a 6-acre parcel of land that the town owns that was deeded to the town. I think it was 1955 or so. And in the deed, it indicated, actually it was a finance committee vote back then, that the town was to accept the land for playground purposes. So we have a couple of legal issues there. One is that we need an easement if we're gonna build the microgrid from the town over approximately 1 acre of the 6-acre parcel. And the second issue is because it was originally referenced as playground purposes, not only do we need an easement, but we need approval from town meeting, which we would anyway for the easement, to go to the state legislature on a home rule petition to allow us to construct to use that portion of land for the proposed use as opposed to for playground purposes. If you're familiar with the land, it's largely ledge. It is unlikely to ever get used as a playground. But that's something we'll address down the road in terms of providing other land potentially for a park or a playground if that's what the town desires. So that's kind of what brought us to the town council. It brought us to the planning board. Both boards unanimously supported this petition. In fact, this petition I think will be brought forward with the town council as the sponsor. But I think Steve thought it appropriate, and we agreed that the FinCom should weigh in on it as well, because it does involve an easement of town land for no consideration. So that's what brings us before you tonight. Mr. Chairman, with your permission, I'll just now defer to Pete to kind of cover some of the details of the proposed use.
Great, thank you, Mike.
Yep.
Thanks, Mike. We actually just released a little informational video on it today, so I'll encourage you to take a look at that. Really what we're looking at doing, this all started when the tech was trying to go for gas heating in that new building. And one of the issues we have as a light department right now is the fact that the increased heat load just adds an incredible burden to the gas system as a whole, but most importantly to the ratepayers, because obviously we're winter peaking on the gas side, and that's a huge challenge for us, a large building like that. So we began working with the tech a year ago to try to strongly encourage them to go all electric. As part of that project, we needed to come up with ways that we could both financially incent them to go that way, because that was going to be a challenge, but also environmentally make sure it worked for the ratepayers in the town as well. So what we came up with is this concept of an energy park. The reason we're doing it this way is that we're going to install solar on the roofs of this school and potentially the new high school as well, or whatever happens at the old high school site. There'll be solar on both roofs. We'll install a battery, a natural gas fired generator, and some switch gear that would serve the loads, the emergency loads of both buildings. What that generates is immediate savings to both projects of approximately $1.2 million, because neither would have to have an emergency generator at their building any longer. It would now become centrally managed from the energy park. In addition to that, we could use it as a capacity resource to lower the rates for everybody. So those are the mutually beneficial situation that we're working on. The issue becomes we needed a location to place that's physically located between the two sites. So that was the challenge, and that's what we had Hayes Engineering do a complete assessment of basically all of the opportunities on Hemlock Road. And this location that we're seeking is 1 acre out of that 6 acre parcel. What we're looking to use is about 2/3 of that to start, and then hold out an additional potentially a third, any kind of future technologies that we could tie into that park as we move towards the long-term goal of net zero by 2050. We strongly anticipate that there may be other technologies that would develop over time, or we would also have the opportunity to expand the size of the batteries if necessary down the road. So I think that that's why we're seeking that 1 acre. It also, the way the land is structured topographically, it's kind of the flatter piece, and before you get to that cliff that Mike was talking about in terms of ledge. So that we've identified this particular parcel as the most opportune location for this project.
All right, great, Peter, thank you, go ahead.
In terms of just some raw numbers, so if the high school does get built, this project would actually save the capital construction costs about $1.2 million, we anticipate. In addition, we would install the solar on the roof for free. That solar, we estimate based on the conceptual designs today, would be about 300 kW. generating about 650,000 kWh per year. Of that, about 500,000 kWh, we're estimating again, based on the preliminary conceptual designs of the roof, about 500,000 kWh would flow back to the school directly. Based on the use, any overflow would go to the energy park and help charge the battery. We anticipate not only $1 million, like 1.2 million in savings up front for the capital construction cost, but also a little over $100,000 a year in energy savings for the new high school. Or again, if something in the existing high school stays, we would have the opportunity to do the same thing at that school.
Great. Was that that cover it, Pete? Is that what we wanted to hit
I
on?
think so, unless there's questions.
All right, a couple of questions. Bill, you have a hand up?
Yeah, so Pete, you just started touching on that, but can you recap again how you calculate $1.2 million savings? And so who benefits from that savings? How do they benefit?
So the 1.2 million would be the estimated cost of the portion of the project that required for emergency generation. The all-electric building would most likely require a 2000 kW generator and as an emergency backup system, and it would be a diesel fired generator. So based on the numbers that we have from the tech project, we anticipate that that's an avoided cost of 1.2 million. That was based on their estimate. We anticipate both schools will be roughly the same size from an electrical load perspective. So that's where the savings based on the generator would come from.
That's for each school, right?
Pardon me?
That's for each school.
Yes, it would be a savings of about 1.2 million for each school.
Each school, okay. All right, thank you for that.
Again, what we're doing is we're centralizing those emergency resources at the energy park, so neither one of them has to have their own diesel fired generator.
I think,
Thanks.
if I could just add a little bit to that
Yep.
too, I think that the way that this is set up, particularly with the natural gas generator backup, both schools could be emergency evacuation sites as well in the event of a problem in the town.
Stefan, you had a question?
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify if that $1.2 million savings that you had quoted also includes any reimbursements associated with MSBA reimbursement for school construction costs.
So this would be basically coming out of the town share of that money. The MSBA number is going to be set. So if we're looking at the tech as the model, they're going to get budgeted, and then we're going to help with those savings, from behind the curtain. So basically, if you look at the example of the tech, their number's already been set. They're over budget. They're looking for ways to cut their impacted costs. So in this case, it would be similar. We're going to, the design of this building would be $1.2 million less because we wouldn't need to, the town wouldn't need to put a 2000 kW emergency diesel generator there as part of the project.
That answer the question, Stefan?
Yeah, I believe so. Thank you.
Right, so basically the 1.2 is not part of the total budget for the school because of this situation. It's a lower number for the overall construction
Correct.
budget. Right, okay. Any other questions? So obviously, Peter, my only question then is the electric school. So you have capacity in the electric side and a deficiency in the region on the gas side. Is that the desire for the vote to be the way it is?
Yeah, I mean, obviously the biggest capacity risk is on the gas side right now. And again, from an electric capacity perspective, we're in pretty good shape. Obviously, there's upstream generation questions that we're going to be dealing with for the next 30 years. But the reality is, from a system perspective, we're in excellent shape with the Wallace substation that we built 8 years ago, and BB. We're in very good shape from an electrical infrastructure perspective to serve this load. Actually, one of the benefits of this particular location is that we're going to out on Farm Street, we'll have lines from both substations passing by so that from a reliability perspective, this section of town is going to be extremely reliable because it's going to be able to be fed from either Wallace or BB station. And again, it'll also serve as a microgrid. We'll be able to isolate from the grid at that location and serve it completely from the generator and the battery if we needed to.
Very good, thanks. Any other members? All right, Steve, you want to vote on this at the end with the rest of them?
You can do whatever you want, but I would point out, Mr. Chairman, that the town council does support this proposal as well.
Yeah, I was curious about the town, and that was this week or last week, you had a meeting?
Was probably a month ago at a meeting, yeah.
My only question I was gonna ask you last week, and I didn't, Steve, was the timing of this, going before town meeting and the dialogue and the possible high school and maybe not a high school. I was just a little worried, but it sounds like, the way Pete and Mike described it, obviously it's for both schools, so I just think we might have to explain that a little bit at the upcoming town meeting. Why we need why we're trying to do this now. We haven't even agreed on the school. I just see some dialogue on that. That's all.
I understand that, but we have some hoops to jump through. It's not only the town that needs to sign off on this at town meeting, but we do have to approach the state legislature to get approval for that through them. That takes a little bit more time. And the light department does need some lead time to get all their equipment and get this done, as you guys know. And I mean, either way, it will go to the vote to help with them and to help us with our grid capacity. And something's going to happen at the high school, right? If it's not a brand new one, it's an ad reno. So
I'll be interested to see if anything comes up at town meeting. That's all.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we've been thinking about is the fact that even if the new high school didn't happen, we know that something needs to happen at the old high school. And ultimately, we could put solar on that roof if it stayed the way it is right now and still tie it into the park.
Right.
So there's opportunities there as well that we could handle.
All right. I'd like to vote on this now, Steve, if it's
Sure.
all right with you.
Yep.
So is there any further discussion? Can I entertain a motion?
I will move approval. This is Dan.
Second. Evan.
So let's move approval for Article 5 for the Wakefield Municipal Gas Light Department easement. Any other dialogue, discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Anyone opposed? No opposition. All right, you guys are welcome to stay. Got other things to talk about. Thank you for coming if you don't.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Nice night.
I strongly encourage anybody that you come
Yeah.
across that has any questions, feel free to reach out to us over the next week before the town meeting. We have an email that's been set up. There's a video on the website now, so there's a lot of information available. If you hear of anybody that has any questions, direct them to our website and we're happy to answer any questions.
And I will say the video was great. You guys did a great job with the video. Really
Thank you.
captures the whole thing.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
All right, take care. Thank you. Okay, so back to, I'd like to just take care of the subcommittee meeting minutes. I know Dawn's not here, but Doug is. Is that enough? Two of them?
Yep, it's enough.
Yeah, so referring back to the Finance Committee Forecasting Subcommittee meeting minutes, October 6, 2022. It was an attachment on the link. Steve, item 2, there's a couple of typos there for fiscal year. It's
Oh, okay. I got
twice
that.
twice
Yeah.
there were typos, 2 different spots.
Wow.
I thought it covered, I listened to the meeting. I thought it covered everything. Any discussion on the meeting minutes?
This is Dan. I'll move approval.
I'll second.
Okay, approve, seconded. Any discussion? Subcommittee, all those in favor?
Aye.
Unanimously, 2.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. So now item 4 is the report of the forecasting subcommittee, kind of some highlights of that meeting, Dan, I would believe.
Yeah, so on that meeting, we obviously we discussed a lot about, going forward in terms of the forecast and the changes. And as the meeting minutes describe, we got a little bit of a curveball with a delay on the power line, adding to our new growth for the year. And so I started making some changes to the forecast. And for those that were at the tri-board meeting, this is going to be a repeat. But basically, we're just hanging in there at something a little bit less than 10% reserve because our free cash is not expected to grow nearly as much. Actually, it's going to decrease a little bit, then start growing again. And the other thing that's, besides that being, okay, we're going to hang in there, is inflation. I did see today that there was some good news on the inflation front. And of course, the stock market took off because of it. But
Can you imagine 7.8? Good news, huh?
well, that's comparing year over year. But if you look at, let's say, now versus 3 months ago, it's gotten pretty flat. So the big hit was in the spring and early summer. So that kind of news, obviously it's welcome. But some of the concerns that we've got is, with the high inflation, what does it mean for union contracts? And there are a number of large unions that are up this coming year, July 1. And if there's a lot of pressure to increase the COLA piece of those contracts, then the public safety, for example, is one big spot. Schools is another one. I think the teachers, what they call it, the A group is up this year, and that's a huge contingent of people. And so one of the things that we really pushed at the tri-board meeting, and we discussed it at the forecasting meeting, was the schools have to keep their increase down to 4% or less. Otherwise, we are going to be running into some significant deficits, or we're going to be cutting services in other areas. So once again, it boils down to the schools. But yeah, I've been on a little bit of a roller coaster. I was really pessimistic, then I was really optimistic, and now I'm a little bit pessimistic again.
All right. Any discussion, comments, others?
Or questions?
Questions, yes. One of the things I do want to do, I think, Dan, is offer another meeting for the group to review the forecasting spreadsheet and maybe have some dialogue about, there was discussion last year on the revenue side of things, how that's made up, and maybe just get generally a little more educated on the revenue side. We spend bulk of the time talking about the budgets on the expense side. So we'll probably talk to Steve and put out another meeting, probably right after the town meeting, try to squeeze it in before the holiday season, but
Sure.
just,
I was going to talk a little bit about the revenue, but I didn't want to steal Kevin Gill's thunder.
Yep.
Because that's coming up soon in the agenda.
Yep. Questions then so far? All right. Thank you, Dan. The review of fiscal 22. So the book should have been one of the attachments, one of the links you saw, right? It was really the whole book, Steve, correct?
Yep, it was the entire book. Yep. For the entire report.
Don't know if Kevin's covering that or you'd cover that. Or...
I'll give a brief synopsis on the appropriation and expense side, and then we can talk a little bit about the revenues as well. So I think the departments once again did a good job in returning money to the town, and kudos to the department head, including snow and ice. I think they returned about $100 to the town, but that's good. It's better than going the other way.
Yeah.
So a little over 1.1 million was returned to the town when the department heads, and there's a lot of little, each department doing a little bit here and there. But I will say that again, the larger return was from the health insurance area. That happens every year, and every year I'm very happy, and that's a great job by our staff. They're really working, employee by employee to move them to a plan that fits all their needs, yet costs the town less money. And again, next year is going to be another challenge in that regard. As always, which is one of our plans, has now been taken over by Brigham's Mass General. And Brigham's Mass General, I think by the name of Brigham's Mass General, may be viewed by some as, hey, that's the plan I want, even though you can utilize everything in that plan by going into one of the plans that the premiums are lower for both the employee and the town. So we will once again feel a sting there, and we'll work hard to work through that. GIC rates will be out, preliminary rates will be out next week, I'm told. So that could be very inappropriate discussion if we do have a meeting, between now and the end of the year, Jim, to talk about forecasting. Then we might have a little bit of hard numbers to jump in there. But so that's something we're looking at there. I'll tell you on the town side that anything that was carried forward, the other part of the year-end report are the carry forwards, and we did carry forward monies mainly for capital and capital projects that just weren't completed for a myriad of reasons. Supplies didn't come in, permitting didn't happen through the DEP, but basically everything on the town side, for the municipal departments, everything they carried forward was basically in the capital area. $7,000 in accounting for the audit that's done the next fiscal year, timing wise. So we carried forward to cover that. So I think, again, I think the department heads did a really good job, and, Kevin really, to a great extent reviews the budgets and the expenditures on a week-to-week basis. I do as well, certainly not as much as Kevin does. So we're looking for anomalies right away. So thank you, and thank you to the Finance Committee for looking into that. On the revenue side, we did see some nice.
Wait a minute.
Wait.
Before you jump to revenue, I want to know what the schools are doing.
Well, yes. I was going to save that for the end, Dan.
All right.
All right.
Go
On the
ahead.
school side, I will tell you that in my experience here, I haven't seen a carry forward of that amount. I mean, that amount was what, 1.2 million, Kevin?
No, 2 million.
2 million, 1.9 million, 1.9 million. And I think that does warrant some questions. It looks to me like a lot of it may have been special ed services, but I'm not sure of that personally. But that does mean that some of that money isn't being spent this year on that, because if you're paying forward, because it's a service, it's not a road that you already plan to pave, and you just didn't do it in this fiscal year. So you're still going to pave that road. So this is paying for services that were already paid for. Maybe Kevin, do you want to jump in? I think that's my analysis on that.
Sure, Steve. So on the 1.9 million, there was an amount over $1 million that the school did use to prepay sped tuitions. They did some last year similar to this, but not to the extent that they did it this past year.
So Kevin, does that mean that for the 23 budget, it's too high by all the prepayments?
I suppose you could look at it that way.
Right, so what you're saying is the 1.9 was from last fiscal year and they pulled it into this fiscal year, is that correct?
Correct.
Right.
So they pulled it into this fiscal year and increased their available cash or whatever they did with it. It was brought from last year, not spent into this year. Correct?
Right, they used it to prepay, they used last year's money to prepay fiscal 23 sped tuitions.
But you said that's $1 million. What about the other 800,000?
And excuse me, is the mechanics to do that before the end of last fiscal year, or is it pushed forward into this fiscal year for use in this fiscal year?
They carried it forward in this year, from last year to this year to prepay tuitions.
Thank you.
And the other 800,000?
The other 800,000 was a couple of vehicles. I think there was a bus in there, and then there was quite a few supplies. Which the supply portion, normally, you would see maybe several $100,000 that the school would have at the end of a fiscal year that they would buy supplies for the following fiscal year. That has been something that's been ongoing since I've been here, but never to the extent that I've seen this past year.
Right, and that is generally, I mean, that's an acceptable thing, because again, what you don't want to have them do is you don't want to have them run out of money in May for stuff that they might need to purchase.
Evan? Well,
There-
go ahead, sorry.
I'm sorry, Jim, there was one more thing that there is concern that I also have with their sped circuit breaker account, which is like a revolving account that they have. They finished the year with just under $1 million in that account. And the money comes from special education outplacements that the state reimburses the town some portion of that expense. So those expenses were from fiscal 22 that they got reimbursed. The money's in that account. So that money is sitting there also. So I was looking at it that, you know, the school had not only the 1.9 million in their operating budget that they carried forward, they also had approximately $1 million in the sped circuit breaker account.
Right, it isn't the sped circuit breaker work that way? Costs from last year get reimbursed in the next year? Is that your recollection?
It usually gets reimbursed quarterly, usually, and it's usually from that fiscal year, the fiscal year that you're in. So the monies that are sitting in that account right now, or at the end of the year, would be fiscal 22 or prior sped costs that they got reimbursed for.
All right, Evan?
So Kevin, just help me understand this. Was this an encumbrance?
Yes,
And it was of what value? What dollar value?
for what? The total school?
Yeah.
The total school was 1.9 million.
And so are those for costs that were, or services that were incurred and rendered in that particular fiscal year?
The vast majority, with the exception of the sped tuitions. And legally, they are able to prepay the sped tuitions.
So there's like, is there an exception in chapter 44 for that? For sped
Yes.
tuition?
There was I'm not sure if it's chapter 44, but there is an exception to that.
Okay. All right. Because I always understood an encumbrance, it has to be for services rendered or costs incurred in a given fiscal year. Like you have to do it that way, right? On the
Right,
town side.
right. So like on their carry forwards, I think there's a school bus that's in there for $140,000. That is something that they've placed the order for, but it hasn't been delivered yet. So therefore they didn't pay it.
Sure. Well, that's a legitimate encumbrance,
Right.
even on your side of the.
Exactly.
Right. Okay. All right.
Yep.
Thank
But
you.
is that an insurance reimbursement? Is that the one that went on fire?
Yes. I think that, I'm sorry, Dennis, I'm not sure if that's the one that got on fire or if that was a new one over and above that one.
Yeah,
I'm not sure.
Dan,
Yeah, so Kevin was good enough to give me a list of recent encumbrances of the school. And in 2018, they kept $2,400. In 19, it was 35,000. Okay, so those are reasonable numbers. But in fiscal year 20, it jumped to 831,000. In 21 is 1.3 million. And in 22, it's 1.9 million. So I'm looking at a trend that is really pretty disturbing in that they keep coming back to us and asking for more money above any other department, yet they're not spending what they've been given. They're rolling it over into the next year. This is just bad accounting. And bad budgeting. I mean, we're supposed to get a budget based on what they need, and they're giving us a wish list. And if they don't spend it, they're just hanging out of the money. I don't find this acceptable, but I may be the minority here, but encumbering $2 million from one year to the next just makes no sense to me.
yeah, I think we ought to have Doug and the rest of us that are on the subcommittee ask and try to get some more clarity. I'm curious if to some of it is the unspent due to COVID and all of these words that continually get used to cover things of reality or fiction or whatever. But if you didn't have any sped activities for the year, you certainly could have returned that money. But it'd be interesting to try to learn a little bit more about it. Maybe Kevin already does. I don't know what Kevin shared with you, but it was just the list of what's happened the last few years. Dan, is that what you got?
Yeah, and I think he got forwarded to you, Jim.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know if I saw it, then I didn't see it, but Stefan.
Yeah, Jim, I was actually going to mention something similar in the same vein as what you just mentioned. I'm curious if these additional dollars that are being held and encumbered moving forward are a result of potentially reduced labor costs or something related to folks or maybe lower headcount in the school or budgetary funds that they had set aside for new hires, but have been having trouble filling the positions, something of that nature.
Right.
The other thing I was going to mention too, that given the fact that Unit A is up for negotiation forthcoming, having this, I guess, bow wave in the school budget may be a benefit, I guess, for the town overall. In that the next year's budget may not have to go up as nearly as much as it would have had these additional funds not being covered.
Okay. Yeah, I know Christine had sent an email to Doug Butler, myself. We were on the subcommittee last year. Or I think me anyway, about trying to get together to look at where things are to date. So we had exchanged emails. Again, I don't know if Doug Butler was on it, but I know I was on it. So Dan?
Yeah, just a reaction to Stefan's comment regarding their union negotiations, that it might help them. But these contracts are over 3 years, and the new contracts never reduced or go down. So to me, this, if they're going to use some of the 1.9 million for contract, they can't use more than a couple 100,000 of that, because that new contract will run for 3 years and will be basis for the next 3-year contract and so forth. So that could become a real problem beyond year 1 and year 2.
Evan, I think.
Yeah, I'm just going to get this out of the way, Mr. Chairman. I refrained from saying it at the tri-board meeting because everybody was in a good mood. I don't always want to be the skunk at the picnic. But since Dan brought it up, and I know we're getting to our revenue segment here, but Dan's absolutely correct. You cannot use that money for for collective bargaining. That's insane. And if the law allows for it somewhere, Kevin, I'd be stunned. But I don't know, maybe it does, but it's still bad financial practice. The one thing I wanted to mention on this is Doug Lyons mentioned at the tri-board meeting, he sort of gave a little foreshadowing that inflation's up. We're going into another 3-year bargaining cycle here with the teachers. And it was sort of, it felt to me like a warning, like you might get a bigger contract than you're used to seeing. And to me, and whether it's the town side or the schools, I kind of don't want to hear it. For 3 or 4 bargaining cycles here in a row, we've seen CPI be pretty close to flat, and we continue to give away 3 points a year in the COLA. So like, just because it's convenient for the union now that CPI and inflation are particularly higher than 3 points, I don't think that means we all of a sudden allow that argument to be convenient for the union when we didn't use it. Because I was squawking for a few years now that when CPI is close to, it was like 0.5, 0.6, it was low. And so if you really want to make it a true cost of living adjustment, we should have been giving away 1.5 points, a point back then. So just while we're talking about, how we need to keep our forecast in check, I just want to plant that seed now. I don't really want to hear it.
Very good. Stefan, you still have your hand up?
Yeah, I wanted to make just a general comment, I guess in terms of forecasting. And this is sort of related to that bow wave comment that I made earlier. I think with a lot of, inflationary concerns that are just currently the zeitgeist of the day, I just wonder if we should just be a little bit more proactive in terms of just the overall town budget and doing everything we can to create that bow wave to potentially support, higher than historical labor negotiation settlements. Because, I feel like in this particular situation that we find ourselves in, giving someone a 3% raise happens to be like a 4% loss year over year for this particular individual. I don't see us or the school committee sticking to a 4% increase in this type of environment. I just don't see how that's possible. And I just feel like it should behoove us to kind of be a little bit more proactive in potentially addressing a higher percentage increase than that 4%.
All right. Dan?
Yeah, just on that, thanks, Stefan. That's good. The only issue we really have is that our costs are subject to inflation, but our revenue is not. Our revenue is the only thing that helps us on the revenue side is local receipts, excise taxes on vehicles, which is roughly, I think, $4 million. So we'll get a little help on that local receipt. We'll get a little help on hotels and meals. But 80+% of our revenue is, the property taxes, and we got Prop 2.5. So if we do get high inflation on the budget side of expenses and union contracts, a very small portion of our revenue is also tied to inflation. So high inflation is just a double whammy for us. It really hurts us a lot. And in terms of that bow wave, we're trying to keep our reserves up to at least 10% of our budget. And right now it's roughly, I think, 7 or 7.5%. So we haven't created that, it'd be great if we had 12 or 15% in reserves to handle a high inflationary period on our contracts. But right now we just don't have it. I think we're around 7% of the reserves versus our total budget. So good thoughts, but right now the money is not there.
Just one final comment. There's an item in the article summary sheet free cash to reduce tax rate of $2.5 million. I believe if I remember correctly, this is a year-over-year constant thing that we included. But is that something that we should continue to include?
So is that the free cash we need to balance the budget for the year, or what is that you're referencing, Stefan? Do you have it on the sheet or something?
Yeah, sorry, it's called, in the article summary fiscal 2022, it was listed as free cash to reduce tax rate appropriation for 2022, 2.5 million, expenditure 2022 of 2.5 million.
That was last year, yeah. Yeah,
Is that the free cash to balance budget, Steve? Is that
yes,
what that line is?
that's the free cash to balance budgets, yeah.
Oh, this is a balanced budget one, okay.
Yeah.
So we're using the cash, which is being stated as such, like you say, Stefan, in lieu of raising taxes is what I guess the line is written as. And I don't have it in front of me, but
Yeah, I guess then to continue that, then, I guess should we be doing that?
right. And I
Keeping
think,
the tax rate artificially low.
right.
Well, the tax
I-
rate is still going up 2.5%.
Yeah, I would just say that looking at the reserves, and I was looking at the forecasting, I am concerned that the reserves are getting low and they're going to get lower by all accounts, looking at the forecasting model. So, maybe we had it too good and were too good in the previous years, as Evan describes with the CPI. But Doug Butler.
Well, speaking about Evan and the CPI, like he's out of his mind if he thinks it was 0.5 for anything other than like a brief blip in time. Well, over the last 5 years, it's probably averaged somewhere 175 to 2. And that's around what we've given them, over the last road on a rolling 3-year basis. So, I mean, look, and I'm not saying like, I'm not pro give that big raises should be coming. Because again, the other thing that we all have to recognize is that if you give 2.5, that's really giving 3.5 because of the way they make the steps and everything work. So that's something that I believe, we'll have that conversation with Tom and them. And by the way, same goes with Steve and his gang is like, you can't, every time anybody picks up a college credit, it's like, another $500. So, yeah, there are things that probably need to be changed in terms of negotiating with our unions. I'm looking at like, the excess reserves of the 2 million. I'm looking through like what I only had the last monthly financial statement I had detailed from them was sort of the end of last year. That's what we got. That's what they had ready when they came to us in March. There's a big balance in the school in the lunch side. That was 600 grand. There was an athletics overage. They had a lot of excess money in Wakefield Academy and in preschool tuition. So at that point, they were like 1.3 to the positive. And there was something about, as I looked through it, they were also, heavily positive on that, and Jim, I think you've seen it, where they do the monthly plan, the ARPA money and the special ed money and everything else. They hadn't, they had probably hoped for some of that to offset it. And I think we did end up using some of that, Steve. I think if I recall correctly,
363,000.
right, but I think if we recall correctly, they didn't figure that out until that it was definitely coming until, February or something like that. Like, I don't think you guys had made up your minds what you were doing with that money. Yeah, I just worry that like, sometimes, the and not to get Pete-ish on this whole thing, but Dan and Evan, like, put down the torches and
Put down the torches and what? We lost you.
pitchforks
Thank
coming
you.
after the
I do struggle doing that, Doug. You're right. They're always in my hands, admittedly, but I would love to see a 10-year look back at cumulative CPI versus the COLAs. We can just look at the COLAs. We don't have to look at total wage increases. We can look at the COLAs and we can see how much better the unions made out against CPI. I guarantee you.
Oh, yeah, they've definitely made, I mean, yeah, they've definitely done better.
So I actually,
That's all
I'm,
I'm saying, Doug. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm looking at it right now, Evan. And the last 10 years from 2011 to end of 2020, the average was 1.74%.
And we gave away 3 points a year, didn't we? Just in COLA.
No,
Forget
I
the
don't
other stuff.
think, I don't think that's what it was. I think it was two a lot of those years.
Ooh, there was a lot of 1.5, 1.5, 1.5, 1.5.
Yeah, a lot of those, like, you know, yeah, the like 6-month windows.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
know.
All right. My pitchfork's down. My torch is down. I'm just saying.
Right.
let's-
I'm not saying, like, you know, they can't come to us with 7-7 because the thing is they can come, you know.
That's all
Yeah,
I'm
I
saying.
think Dan's point, on the inflation side, it affects one side, not the other, is, a point well taken. The reserves, as I said earlier, that worries me that the reserves are going down. It looks like they're going to continue to go down. We got a AAA bond rating, you got all of these pieces that go into an equation, and I don't want us to be thought of otherwise any different than how we are thought of, trying to be fiscally responsible, and we need to just continue to be that way. And relative to the budgets, it's the inflation has affected so many things in so many ways, and it hasn't been here for feels like a generation, for God's sake. So it's just it's an interesting time. I'll just leave it at that.
It'll be forgotten about by the end of next year.
I hope you're right.
Optimism.
I am writing that down.
Although, by the way, oil could still be at like 130, 140 at the end of next year. And,
And the reserve is empty. What's the next rabbit out of the hat? But let's move on.
okay.
So sorry, I think maybe we get a little off track on the revenue side.
We never talked about the revenue side, but that's okay. Revenue side last year, we budgeted, or we anticipated, Kevin and I, 6.8 million, and actual local receipts came in at 7.8 million. So Dan won once again. Interestingly enough, we are seeing this fiscal year that we're in right now, meals taxes, hotel taxes, and building permits are excellent, and are carrying through. So I anticipate local receipts to exceed expectations for this fiscal year. So far, things could happen. So I'm a little bit more positive than optimistic than Dan is. But
Right.
no, we
And
can.
I did share, Kevin gave me the revenue last year and the year before. I did share the last year's with the team. So that was part of the package. So people have that. The comparisons was nice, showing the budget and the actuals and the delta for the local receipts, to give a little more context around some of where the revenue comes from and how it's made up. So you have that in the link. If you haven't looked at it yet.
One thing we haven't accounted for is all these people moving in the condos, whether it's Grayson Lofts, or which is, I guess, 2/3 occupied right now, which is the new one on Albion Street. And hopefully we're gonna make sure we get all those excise taxes too. So get all those cars registered here, so it doesn't hurt. But revenues are coming in good this year so far. So we'll keep going, and hopefully the big issue will be the power line. I don't know why utilities have that. You guys have a great lobbying group in the utility world to make sure that it doesn't get taxed until it gets completely online. So hopefully that'll happen this year, and that'll bubble through and things will get a little bit better. The other item I don't know about, question 1 passing. I don't know what that means for municipalities. I don't know where that money goes. Does it go to school buildings, which will certainly help? Does it go to Chapter 70? does it go to chapter 90, which would be transportation in my mind. So that'll be another interesting item as we go forward. So I am a little bit optimistic in that area. But all in all, a good year. Kevin did a great job as always in
Yes.
bird dogging all of this.
Okay. Any comments on the revenue from what Steve just described or anybody else? I know you got your hand up, Dan. Hold on one sec.
So I was gonna ask Steve on that, as a question one, I believe. And they said some of the revenue is gonna come in this spring and some later. But my question is, we're supposed to get a refund of our taxes based on some part of the Massachusetts law where if they raise too much money, there's a refund.
Right.
And the legislators are right now trying to figure out how, to send that money back to the taxpayers. So if, for example, the question one generates an extra $1 million of revenue, does that $1 million then become subject to that same cap that they're trying to figure out, or is that above and beyond and increases the cap?
That is an excellent question that I don't have an answer to, but I will get you one.
Just
Yeah,
curious.
as far as the tax refunds go, the rebate thing, that is happening. A family member got one already that I'm aware of. The 2.9 billion, I think it was, or a little higher. So
Yeah, so I mean, there's a 2.9, let's assume for a second, question one was already in effect. Would the 2.1 billion become 3? Yeah, I don't know. That's
yeah, I mean that law, that legislative component, that you would have to read it. It's a percentage, I think. I don't have all the facts about it, but I know it was an in excess amount. I mean, let's face it, you get casinos, you got marijuana, you got different revenue streams that certainly are probably helping in a lot of ways. So
yeah.
But that new law, doesn't that say subject to their appropriation? So in
Right.
effect, and they can just sit on it from year to year and not appropriate it?
Yeah, no, it's a total shell game. You're going to expect to see the schools go up by, say, $1 billion, but it's the same. It's all one pile of money. I don't know. It'd be interesting to see.
Yeah. Excellent question.
Thanks, Dan.
I
All
wish I
right,
had an answer for you, Dan. I'll get you one.
You may not find one. They may have to figure that out.
Yeah.
All right, so revenue fiscal year 22. Did we cover that?
I think so.
And again, the book is a part of the link that you got that'll be in the at the town meeting, correct?
Correct. Yep.
Identifying how the money was appropriated, et cetera. Any comments then on the budget side, on the revenue side, before we move to the articles? Okay. Steve, you want to start, or Kevin starting with?
I'll start. I'll start.
Yep.
Article 1 will be the fiscal year 2022 presentation, which the FinCom does not give a recommendation on because it's really the numbers are the numbers. So that we kind of talked through that. Article 2 is utilizing free cash to balance the budget. Last year, we used $2.5 million and some other, we also did some free cash articles that we didn't do in the in the Springtown meeting, I mean. So this year we're using $3.3 million to balance the budget, which will allow the assessor to send out the tax bills, which you will very happily get prior to Christmas if you, prior to the new year, because years ago it made a lot more sense to pay that February 1st tax bill in December. It doesn't make as much sense anymore with the new tax laws, federal tax laws, but you'll have the option. So we'll be using 3.3 million of our free cash, which is 6.6 now. So we'll drop down to 3.6, 3.7, and we have 3.2 million in stabilization that will still remain. So between that and the sped stabilization and everything, we'll be around that 7% area. We like it at 10. And hopefully we'll, be a little wobbly for the next couple of years, then move that up.
All right, any discussion on that Article 1 for the free cash, 3.3 million this year? All right, we will go through the process of voting on this article then.
I'll move approval.
Dan moves approval. Any second?
Second,
Thank
Who
you.
was the
Was that
second?
Evan, I think?
Evan? Okay.
Was
It
that
was
Evan? Yes, thank you. Any discussion on Article 2, free cash for 3.3 million of balance? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? No one opposed. Thank you. The cleanup article, Article
The
3?
cleanup article, totally the maker of the motion's fault, which was me. When we funded our capital expenditures at Article 2 in the spring, I misspoke and took the water and sewer areas out of receipts instead of retained earnings, which is what we had always planned on. So I do need to clean that up because the receipts, just as much as I pushed Joe, couldn't handle it this year. And I wouldn't want to come back and push for a higher water rate at in mid-year to cover it. So completely my fault, only proving what my wife has told me for years, that I am not infallible. So.
Excellent. I'll entertain discussion on Article 3. No discussion. Can I get a Dan?
Yeah, I'll move approval.
second,
Evan, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, the motion then, move approval for Article 3. All those in favor?
Aye.
aye,
Anyone opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Next one, Article 4, is the special tax legislation. Steve, you got that one, I
Yes,
think?
if the FinCom remembers, in April of 2018, we did present the community and then had to again go to get special legislation through the state legislature to give a tax break for Wakefield seniors who were property owners in Wakefield and that qualified for the circuit breaker on their income through the state. So in other words, if you owned your home in Wakefield and you qualified for the state circuit breaker, which means that your income for a single individual does not exceed 62,000, 78,000 for a head of household, 93 for married couples filing joint return. And you lived in Wakefield, and I believe it was 10 years, then we, the town, would say, guess what? Whatever you got on your circuit breaker from the state, which could be up to $1,100, we will also match that on your real estate taxes to help you stay in your home. And that amount got spread around the rest of the residential property owners within the tax levy. So it didn't cost the town any money per se. It did cost individual taxpayers money. And in 2021, to give you the numbers, 164 taxpayers qualified. They received rebates of $170,000, and it cost the average taxpayer $23 a year on their tax bill. In 2022, 250 people qualified, or entities qualified, couples, and it cost $270,000 and was redistributed, and it cost the average taxpayer $26. In fiscal year 23 that we're in now, we've qualified 214, a little bit of a drop there. And it was, again, a corresponding drop on the tax levy, and it cost everybody $28 on their tax bill. So I think personally, this is solely a redistribution within the tax levy. There's no money that goes, that the town doesn't collect or goes out of the town on this, but it does help people stay in their homes a little while longer with dignity. And we hope that this will help if and when the high school comes forward, because it is a help to people. What we're planning to do this for next fiscal year is to allow the Board of Assessors to go up to 150% of the state allowed circuit breaker. And the reason why we're doing that is because costs have gone up, particularly with the possible advent of the new high school, but that the governor does have a bill, or had a bill pending, Governor Baker did, that was going to increase the circuit breaker amount that the legislature never took up. So this would help us move a little bit towards that if they don't do it, and kind of help our people in here. It's been really greatly successful. It doesn't really burden, in my mind, the rest of the taxpayers in the residential area. And if we went to 150, you can do the math. Maybe it's going to cost the Mayo family $40 a year instead of 26. So that's again, no money being spent, no money going out. I think it really is. I think it makes us the envy of a lot of towns around us. Reading has the same program. Melrose has adopted something similar. Most others haven't. So it really is a way to help our seniors stay in their homes. And that's it.
Very good. Questions, Doug? Butler.
Yeah, I'm, help me understand, Steve, it dropped from like 250 or 260 people to 214.
Yeah,
and it
because, you
sounded
know,
like the number went up.
it went up 164 to 250 and then down to 214. And
No, but the amount that I'm covering.
Oh, the went from 269 to 228 when it dropped to 214.
Oh, so yeah, okay. So you said $28 per, and I don't know what
Yeah.
you said the year
Yeah.
before was. It was over 30 then.
It was 26 and then went to 28. Those are Victor's numbers. I can't. I can't.
It seems odd that the number would drop.
It does seem odd to me, and I'm reading his.
So then I guess what I'm concerned about is, like, you know, somebody, and maybe we shouldn't be concerned about this, but somebody who's living in, like, are we giving sizable discounts? Because again, if the number of people covered dropped, but the dollar total went up, it means we're giving breaks to people who are living in much more expensive houses. So, like, you know, if you're living in $1 million house, I'm not sure, should we be giving you a tax break?
Well, there is a
Income limit, you said, Steve?
there are income limits. So you
No,
have
there's income limits, I got you, but you know, that's.
yes, but there's also a asset limit. Your property cannot be valued before residential abatements, because you might get other abatements, but after before residential exemptions, because some communities have that residential exemption, which we don't have. But after abatements cannot exceed 884,000. That's a high level. I think that's more of a looking at statewide, but that is where it is.
Okay.
Yep. The other thing about this is that if you also have to verify that your cost for taxes and water and sewer exceeds 10% of your income the previous year. So you
Okay.
bring in those taxes. So there are people that will qualify 1 year, and then when they bring in their taxes the next year, they don't, because of that part of the law. They don't qualify.
Yeah.
So then they
gotcha.
drop off, and it's kind of rough, but that's.
My dad lives in Yonkers. His taxes are like 12 grand on his house. That is not very big, and I would greatly appreciate this sort of thing there, but
Well, he should move here. We can take care of
you telling me.
it.
Dan?
Yeah, Steve, the
sorry.
214 for this last year or the current year, how many dollars are we talking about spending for the 214 or
214.
redistributing?
228,000.
So it's pretty roughly $1,000 per person.
Yeah,
So, and that's been consistent in the last 2 or 3 years?
yep. But
About a-
last
about
3
a
years,
grand.
it's really spot on about 1,000 per person.
Yeah, so, yeah, I mean, that's a pretty good bite against, you know, a $1,500 or $1,400 increase to put in a high school.
Any other dialogue? All right. I'll entertain a article acceptance.
I'll move approval.
Second, Evan.
Evan, second, thank you. So article number 4 for the special tax legislation, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? No opposition. All right, Steve, any other business?
That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Very good. Any other committee discussion comments? All right, as far as subcommittees, I don't think they're gonna change as we move forward. I've got the list to update. And we'll be in touch. We do have a vacancy that has been advertised, and there's nothing new on that. And I'll probably put it out in an email, but once I give you the subcommittees, you know what your subcommittees are, it probably does make some sense to maybe hold a meeting to get together with the department heads to see how things are going this fiscal year to date. Maybe just right before the budget process might be something that to help a little bit with some information. I know Steve and I talked about that. So if I know it's mid-November now, but let's see what we can do to try to at least hold some conversations of how things are going based on last year's preparation, if you would. So other than that, revenues, I had 2 items, but I already hit those. I think that's all I had. Anybody else? Dennis?
I'll be going in for hip surgery next Thursday, so I won't make town meeting. So
Good luck, Dennis. Hope it goes well for you.
Yeah, good luck.
it's only the 4th one on that side, so I mean, it's time
All right.
time to be done.
Well, I hope you are after this one.
We'll speak on your behalf as necessary. And good luck.
Thank you.
All right, thank you all for making it tonight.
Wait a minute, I'll move to adjourn.
I'll second.
And let everybody know that Wakefield is winning 14-0 at halftime,
Oh, all right.
good.
which would be a big
Awesome.
upset.
Billy, we can watch that on what channel? Okay,
What is it?
It's on YouTube.
YouTube, okay.
Is it
YouTube, and then it
WC?
was, it's the other school's site or something, right?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, South Plymouth.
All right, I'll try to get another meeting in. Thank you for your time and have a good night.
Great. Thank you,
Thanks.
guys.
Thanks.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
I'll.
Hello.